Welcome to Breaking Bread, the place that brings people together around the table. And today we're joined by Paul Griffiths, the CEO of Dubai Airports, here at BV Social Dining. Well, thanks for joining me today, Paul. It's an absolute pleasure having you here at BV Social. Great choice, beautiful setting.
Well, thanks so much. One of my favorite go-to places. The food's fabulous and I love the environment as well.
You know, when I Googled you before our interview, the first thing that popped up, the first search was musician. Paul Griffiths, musician. And I thought, that's not right. And it was you.
Well, there you go.
CEO of Dubai Airports, night job, musician. I have to ask and kind of take you back many, many years. What makes a kid become a church organist?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and it has a slightly bizarre response because I was like a normal kid. You know, I built kits of aeroplanes and I loved transport and, you know, toy cars and everything. So I was quite a normal
guy.
Yeah, absolutely. London kid, London suburbs kid. And I suddenly one day, my best friend at school when I was 10, Philip Reardon, said to me, "Do you want to come and join the church choir?" And I said, "No, not really interested in music, thank you."
Not interested in music?
No. I said I wasn't interested in music because at 10 I had no exposure to it. Although my father, intriguingly, was a jazz pianist. So it was there, but it was sort of dormant within me. Anyway, so I said, "No, thank you, Philip, I'm not really interested." And he said, "Well, you do get paid for it." So I said, when can I start? Yeah, when can I start? Suddenly, the commercial motivation was there. So I went along to the choir practice at the local church with Philip and walked in, and he said, "Do you want to come and have a look at the organ?" And of course, I'd never really had any exposure to what an organ in a church setting was. So he took me over, and this is one of those moments. You know, in The Wizard of Oz, the original Judy Garland movie, everyone loves that movie. What happens, if you remember, is when the tornado comes and the house is whisked away and, you know, we're not in Texas anymore, it changes from black and white to glorious Technicolor. And that was the moment where my life went from black and white to Technicolor.
When you saw the organ?
When I saw the organ and all these stops and the 3 keyboards and the pedals. And of course, what I know now is it was the world's first analog synthesizer I was looking at. And he said, "Come and have a look." And he showed me all the different sounds, and you pull out the different stops and it makes a different sound. And I was just transfixed, and I just wanted to learn to play. And I kept trying to persuade the director of music at the church, "Will you teach me? Will you teach me?" Eventually, he gave in to my persistence and I started having organ lessons. And I remember after I'd started, I went back to school and I was playing. They had a little harmonium that the head teacher used to play. And I was there running through one of the pieces from the book I had. And she came up to me and she said, "Do you know, I never knew that you played a keyboard instrument. You know, how long have you been playing?" And I remember saying, "Well, Miss Hall, since Tuesday." And this was Friday, and I'd learned...
You were obsessed.
Well, I was obsessed.
You were overtaken.
And the thing is, you see, I remember I went to a very small preparatory school in London, and the class sizes were about 30 max. And what we used to do, there were only 4 classrooms in the whole of the school. They split the classes into 2. So one half would do English composition or something, and the other half would do another subject like art or something. Anyway, one day I was doing spelling or conversational essays or something, and the other half was doing music. And on the blackboard were the 5 lines of music. And I remember the head teacher going, you know, E, G, B, D, F, and F, A, C, E, and I sort of clocked it. And I just thought, right, okay, I know how to read music now, click. And the interesting thing is, when I left my preparatory school at the age of 11, Miss Hall, who'd sort of watched my musical development as well as my academic development, said to me, do you know, when you are playing at St Paul's Cathedral in London, I don't care how old and frail I am, if I'm in a wheelchair, I want you to come and I want to be there when you play. Anyway, would you believe?
Fast
forwards, I think probably about 10 years. I went back to the school and I reminded Miss Hall of the fact that she'd said to me, when you're playing at St Paul's Cathedral, I'm coming along. So here I am to tell you I'm playing at St Paul's Cathedral. Would you come along?
And you still don't need a
concert?
wheelchair.
No, fortunately, I was still young enough and she was still young enough not to need any special assistance. So I took her along, and it was a wonderful occasion to be able to really live up to that promise that she made me fulfill.
Okay, I need reactions from parents. You come home one day, you're enthralled with this church organ, and you want to dedicate, I don't know, it sounds like your life to it.
Absolutely.
What kind of reactions do you get at home?
Well, this is quite an interesting question, because I didn't get the reaction I expected. I thought I'd be, wow, that's great, but oh gosh, no, music. And I think this is probably coloured because of my father's experience with music. You know, he always said that, you know, music is a wonderful hobby but a terrible career. And the thing is, I think that it's quite hard to monetize the passion for music unless you're a Taylor Swift or Amy Winehouse or someone, you know. And I think the problem was that, you know, he was a bit concerned that I was going to pursue music full time. And because I wanted to be not just an organist, I wanted to be a cathedral organist. I wanted to play in one of these great sort of minsters around the country in the UK. And there are about 40 jobs that are worth having in that field.
But apparently those 40 jobs have quite the demand.
They do, yes, absolutely. And the thing is that I just was very singly focused on that. But, well, it was, no, you must concentrate on your schoolwork, do your French and German, learn your chemistry, you know, all those sorts of things. And at the time, you can imagine, to stultify someone's passion for something was really quite a hard lesson for me to learn. But actually, in retrospect, I've been incredibly fortunate, because that guidance to get me started on a business career and get an interest that, you know, could be developed and, you know, sort of pursued alongside my music was probably quite a good decision.
And also, bringing you back to the beginning where I Googled you and found out that you're first and foremost a musician according to Google. You have played some incredible venues. You've performed in front of the Pope.
Absolutely, yeah.
You still tour sometimes.
I do, yes.
Which, of course, the first question that comes to mind is, how on earth does he have the time? You're managing the busiest airport in the world as far as international travel. I'm guessing that performing in front of the Pope is a milestone in one's life?
Well, it's something that doesn't usually come around at all, yet alone more than once. And I was very fortunate in 2018 when the Pope made a very, very historical visit. First time for 900 years of a sitting Pope to visit the Arab world. And in the Year of Tolerance, hosted here in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi, and actually in the 𝐬𝐶 Stadium, where the audience, the congregation for the papal mass that I played the organ for, it was a bigger congregation, I think, than someone like U2. So I can say to I can't remember, it's at least 150,000 in the stadium.
With millions tuning in from
Absolutely.
Around the world.
That's right, live streaming on TV, and of course hundreds of thousands of people outside the stadium as well.
So wow, if looking at highlights, because you really have two careers, at least, in parallel. So what are the musical career highlights?
Well, I think after I started, I mean, when I was 13, I was second place in the London competition musical festival, which was, you know, quite good for that young age. And then, of course, I went through all my exams for the Royal College of Organists. I then joined the development board. I'm a vice president of the college now. But I've played in all sorts of different places all over the world, and I'm due to play in Notre Dame in Paris once the rebuild is finished. I was down to play in 2000, but we all know why. So looking forward to that very much.
Good
Hi,
afternoon.
Chef.
Good afternoon.
Well, nice to see you here again in VP Social.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Here we have one of our bites. We start with the cauliflower popcorn and the truffle tofu sauce. It's one of our favorites. Then we have a crispy calamari, which comes with a jalapeno mayonnaise. So it would be ideally to dip each little bite after you have squeezed the lime on top. And then one of our classics, which is the Brussels sprouts. Crispy Brussels sprouts. We have converted so many people already in Dubai. Please enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So how does an executive in London make his way to Dubai in 2007, when Dubai was not what it is today?
That's true. But actually, it was quite interesting because I'd worked in Hong Kong during the 80s and I'd really enjoyed my time overseas in a different environment. And then when I went back to London in the late 80s and worked for Richard Branson for quite some time, it really gave me a taste of adventure because, of course, Richard Branson is the ultimate adventure capitalist, as they used to call him.
Working beside an adventure, a walking adventure.
That's right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'm not someone who likes to maintain the status quo. I always like a challenge where there's a transformational element. And having been working in the UK and at Gatwick for a few years, I know growth at Gatwick wasn't actually much on the agenda, but actually when the opportunity to come to Dubai came along, it just felt right. It felt like a transformational opportunity where clearly the commitments made to the future growth of the aviation sector had been absolutely massive.
How familiar were you with Dubai before moving here?
Well, I think the thing is that one thing had surprised me, and that was in about 2000 when I was running Gatwick. Looking at all the statistics, suddenly Dubai popped up as one of the better airports in the world, and they just opened some new infrastructure. And I remember thinking, where did that come from? And then, of course, Emirates was growing and making a statement on the world of aviation. And I felt that being part of that story would be a really good thing to be. So that's why I was, when I was approached, I was very enthusiastic about the opportunity. And then when I jumped on the plane with 3 suitcases in September 2007, it didn't take me long to realize this was actually the greatest move that I've ever made. And it's been fantastic. I haven't looked back for a moment.
And there's been quite a bit of growth. So in 2008, you launched T3, I guess,
That's
Concourse
right.
A. A few years later, the newer airport, DWC, which is the future, but maybe we haven't fully adapted our mindset yet because you've outgrown the airport so quickly. 2018, you welcomed your 1 billionth passenger with His Highness Sheikh Ahmed. What has this journey been like?
It's been amazing because there's always been something. There's never been somewhere where you can just go and sit back and say, that's a good job, well done, just, brush your hands together and then get on with something else. That seems to be the way that the Dubai story has evolved. And I think, arriving on the world stage now as the world's largest international airport was a very significant moment when we overtook Heathrow in 2014 for that coveted #1 title. That was a real moment, and especially for a Brit, when you are usurping the biggest international airport hub from London and bringing it to Dubai, that was quite a crowning moment, really.
So,
But ever since, we've had all sorts of milestones on the way, and every day something happens. These days, it's all about technology, actually. It's about how do we deploy technology in a way to make better use of the infrastructure we've got. Better quality, better throughput, higher levels of customer satisfaction, higher staff engagement levels. All of those things have been characteristics of the progress we've made over the last few years.
I can't help but think about the people that have shaped you. You've worked alongside Sir Richard Branson for 14 years. Now for the past, since 2007 with His Highness Sheikh Ahmed. How these, you can say, icons shaped you and your leadership style?
Well, it's very interesting you should say that, because I think this is another area where my musical life and my professional life cross over. Because when you're playing the instruments, like a harpsichord or an oboe that I also play, or the organ, in an orchestra, you're part of a team and you're responding to the baton of the leader of the orchestra, the conductor. And those people, to get that artistic excellence out of all of the different people in front of them, are absolute paragons of inspiration. And I believe in my business life, having those paragons of inspiration in 𝐻𝐻𝐫𝐞 𝐸𝐻𝐻, in Sir Richard Branson and other business leaders that I've worked with over the years, has always been incredibly important. And I think if you've got inspirational leadership, then you feel absolutely compelled to do the best you possibly can. And I've tried to mirror that in my own personal style, to inspire people to give, everything they've got to making the world a better place through the product that we provide at the airport.
You mentioned different hobbies, and we'll get to that. But right before the mains, I want to bring you back to Dubai Airport and just share a few moments that stand out in your mind from His Highness telling you what your KPI is up until today. What stands out if someone asks you about your aviation career?
I think there have been so many different things and so many milestones. There's hardly a week that goes by without me being able to say, wow, wasn't that incredible? I mean, I think the introduction of the A380 into Dubai airports by Emirates was a big milestone. I remember the huge crowd that turned up to see that huge aeroplane appear for the first time, and flying on it for the first time as a passenger was absolutely amazing. I do have a huge admiration for the operating crew of aircraft, because the skill and expertise they have is just enormous. Another slight regret I have is that I didn't actually become a pilot, earlier on in my career.
Not too late.
Yeah, I did actually sit an exam for the Royal Air Force in the UK when I was 20, and they found me too mentally unsuited for the discipline of the forces. I think that was the problem.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing, but I love aviation in all its forms.
And I know you love speed, and we will get to that
Indeed.
as well after the main course.
How is your speedy lunch?
It's fantastic.
Amazing.
Everything's great.
Well,
Thank
let's
you.
continue.
Wow.
And we're starting with a ribeye steak, an Australian ribeye steak, 300 days grain fat with some fresh truffle. Then we have a fricke, which is actually a Middle Eastern superfood. It's a grain initially grown in Egypt. And then we have some extra fresh winter truffle. Enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So listening to some of your previous interviews, I've learned that you're somewhat of a speed fan, a man who will not miss an F1 in Abu Dhabi, and that you have some very unique hobbies of restoring planes,
Absolutely.
trains,
Yes.
bikes,
Absolutely. Cars, yes.
cars.
I've always been fascinated with all forms of transport. And I think that's predates my interest in music, actually. All of the books I used to buy were books about cars or trains or anything that moves. And it's been interesting because when I was first becoming proficient at the organ, of course, I had to travel around to play. And a lot of the places I used to play were in London. And I used to have to get the train. And the problem with that on a Sunday particularly was train services weren't always reliable. So when I was old enough, I bought my first moped, which is a tiny little motorcycle. And I really quite enjoyed just zipping up and down. And the sense of personal freedom at the age of 16 that gave me was enormous.
Looking at Paul and the different hobbies / personalities, careers, from music to engines to speed to restoration, musician. CEO of Dubai Airports, what would be the connecting link?
Well, I think the big connecting link is I love complexity and I love seeing complex processes, especially in their involving technology and machines, when it's all coming together and creating an enterprise that really works. And to be able to have the ability to influence and control bits of it and make it work, and then having a point of delighting the people that interact with it. That's the common thread, I think. And I love, getting people together and showing them things that perhaps they wouldn't see in everyday life. Inviting people to a concert at Westminster Abbey where I'm playing a piece of Maurice Duruflé is something that not everyone gets invited to. And it's quite interesting the responses I get, because people from all walks of life are fascinated and they'll just come along. Similarly, with the airports, I love the idea that airports are not just massive pieces of infrastructure with embedded technology, but there are places where people come together. There's always a significant emotion attached to traveling. I'm sure you identify with that,
That is very true.
Do I.
That is very true.
And the thing is, when people come together at an airport, it's either for very sad or very happy reason. They're either being reunited with family, or they're going on a long journey to see friends, or they're being parted from their loved ones, or they're going to say goodbye to someone. So it's a whole maelstrom of human emotion in airports. And I think if you really understand, instead of buildings and glass and steel and technology and process, it's a people business. You are in the business of using people to create an enterprise that delights people and speeds them on their journey. And I always think that, although we'll have 90 million people go through DXB this year, each significant one of those people, and they are significant, they're engaging with us on a very personal basis, on a very special journey, which will probably mean something to them. And we have to reflect that, I think, in our style of service. So I'm always encouraging people to be enthusiastic and warm and responsive. And when I walk through the airport and I see people, and this morning, for example, we went to open a new restaurant and bar, and it was so great to see everyone, not just at the event that we were opening, but on the way, see people smiling, interacting with people. It should be a delightful and pleasant experience for people. And unfortunately, in so many airports around the world, it's far from that. We want to make that at the core of everything we do. There has to be a heart to DXB, and that's what I hope that my people and everyone that's involved in the entire industry here has brought to it.
So bringing you back to your day job as CEO of Dubai Airports, is this still the trickle effect of pandemic, what people call revenge travel, or is this the modern appetite to see the world?
I think what it is a combination of things. The reasons for travel are changing. There are less business travel now and more leisure travel. The actual demographic of customers is changing as well. We're seeing younger people travel. And I think what's happened now, that generational shift has been accompanied by a propensity to travel even more than before, because the Gen Z generation are really not attracted to the same sort of brand status recognition. They want experience, and travel, of course, gives that huge experience the way goods and products cannot give. So I think we had a bit of a reset during COVID, and I think travel now is seen as something that people do not as a discretionary activity, but as part of their normal life. And we have seen huge growth from all over the world in demand for high quality, well-organized and efficient air travel.
So as an airport, what are you doing to meet this demand, first of all, and then understanding this new generation of passengers that think completely different?
That's true. Well, first of all, we've had to reclassify the different types of customer that we have, and we have different groups, and we've had to reset those. And it's very interesting when we research those groups and we take our interactive research very seriously, we found that the triggers for travel and the experiences are very different. Before, it was all about Wi-Fi And now it's all about cleanliness and speed and quality and different things than it was before. Wi-Fi, I think, is now passed into, if you don't have Wi-Fi, you're in the 19th century. So we've got ultra-fast, free-for-all Wi-Fi, and that was a hygiene factor that's become. So I think the thing is, we are in a different phase of growth and development. And I think the deployment of technology to take away the whole process out of the airport and create this non-stop, no red lights customer experience, that's where the future lies. And it's there not just because of reasons of customer service, it's there because, of course, if you can speed people through your infrastructure, you're creating a much higher level of customer satisfaction. And also half the dwell time means double the capacity. And it's a lot cheaper to invest in the technology to achieve that than it is to invest in the infrastructure to grow. And of course, at DXB, we're pretty limited on space. So there are limits to the total capacity, but we're going to push the envelope of capacity by investing in the technology and service necessary to increase the number of people passing through the airport.
Hello again.
Wow, look at
Hello
this.
again.
Yes, so here we closing our meal with our famous 𝐷𝐻, which is basically inspiration from the Western world of a donut. Wow. And since basically 𝐷𝐻, so we are well known for our 𝐷𝐻s, we kind of made a twist, and basically it's based all around the 𝐷𝐻, but it's a 𝐷𝐻. Please enjoy.
Thank you.
Alex. Thank you.
I think something I've repeatedly heard in interviews is how the vision that drives Dubai has always surpassed what most people can see. So if we talk about that vision today and how it affects the world of travel and future travel, what does that look like? What is future travel?
It's interesting because I think it was the vision of Sheikh Zayed who first said, you know, you've got to have an airport and aviation infrastructure if you want a city. The two are absolutely indelibly linked. And I think that's quite unique to have that vision, and to have had that vision at the very start of the UAE was such a unique thing to be able to envisage going forward. I think that's an incredibly important part of it. But I think in the future, there are a lot of other challenges. The challenge of sustainability, for example. We need to find an alternative source of propulsion that's not based on hydrocarbon fuel for air travel. We need to develop other forms of travel, particularly over shorter distances, that can be made to be more eco-friendly. And I think consumers are going to have to play a part in this, in recognizing that the supply chain of all goods and services has to have sustainability embedded in the cost of it. That's going to be a bit of a change, I think, and that may have an impact on the future of aviation, which I think will still be strong. We will solve this particular problem, and it will be solved, I think, in two ways. First of all, finding a substitute for straight hydrocarbon jet A1. And the production of sustainable aviation fuel is in its infancy. It only accounts for about 0.1% of the total jet fuel demand. So there's a long way to go to make that a viable alternative. But then we have to find alternative forms of propulsion, whether that's based on hydrogen or some form of stored electricity that's more efficient than what we've got today. So the ecological challenges are quite significant. We have to overcome those. And of course, we can't carry on just building and building and building. We've got to use our infrastructure in a more sustainable and efficient and effective way, particularly in Europe and America, where the opposition to building new airports is going to be quite significant, I think, over the coming years.
And how far are we, do you think, from passengers and travelers making choices based on sustainability? Because to me, it seems far. People have other things on their priority list that they take into account, especially when wanting to travel. But the second that dictates your choice, so, what type of fuel is being used, that might have a greater impact also on companies and the industry itself. But it doesn't seem like it's anywhere near.
I think the thing is we have to recognise that this is an urgent priority for the entire human race. It's not just an industry phenomenon. And I think the difficulty is governments have got to decide if consumer adoption of alternative technologies and alternative modes of transport is not fast enough and the investment isn't there, then it has to be mandated. And I think that's the role of government, to set reasonable targets and to allow industry to invest in alternative technologies to get this there a bit quicker. And if unfortunately that means that the cost of air travel and other forms of transport and other goods and services has to rise, then I think actually as a human race we really do need to start evaluating what our priorities are. Do we want to make sure that the planet can continue to sustain the human race for an indefinite amount of time, or are we suggesting we just carry on as we are until the point at which everything's depleted and we face a possibility of extinction? I just don't think that that's a palatable alternative. So we have to do something, and if we're not doing it quick enough, then governments have to act to force industry, consumers and the like to take this a little more seriously.
Absolutely. Paul Griffith, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing so many stories and for shedding light on the future of travel and the future of the human race.
Thank you so much. The food and the company have been amazing. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks.